Kass Smith. My last title was museum manager. I started the first museum here at Microsoft. And I started February of 1986 and left June of 1996. I started over at the 4 buildings over at Northrop, which is across from Burgermaster. So I was like in one of those buildings for just a couple of months. Then we moved over to the buildings here, 1 through 4. And so I was in building 4. And what was funny at the time is when we all moved over to these new 4 buildings, the thought was from Bill was that, okay, we're good for 5 years. And he, I think, immediately realized within 6 months, this is not good. We're just going to start growing leaps and bounds. So that's when he started buying more property, and just things just kept growing, growing, and growing. When I started in public relations and trade shows. And so after a few months, I just remember I helped doing the first, or not the first, but the company meeting. And so at that time, I was employee like number 900, so you can tell it was really a small company. So we hosted the company meeting at University of Washington Hub Center, and so I was in charge of what the giveaway was going to be. And so we came up with tennis shoes. And so as you can imagine, tennis shoes for about 500 people that were here on campus, trying to figure out sizes, men and women. That was real interesting. But the interesting part was that we only had, after the fact, we only had to return about a dozen. For some reason, that just all worked out. So when I first started in '86, the first company meeting giveaway at that time was Microsoft tennis shoes, and I still have a pair. It was so different from where I ever worked, because I started when I was in my early 30s, and so I worked for like 3M and other companies. And so when I came here to Microsoft, I was just awestruck because it was so low key. Everybody wore shorts or jeans, and I just wasn't used to that. They offered free drinks, sodas. I wasn't used to that either. The cafeterias, I mean, I couldn't get over the prices. It was just so relaxed, except for everybody worked really hard. And back in those days, we all worked as a team. And right away, I started working with Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer. And it was a good thing that I was naive about this culture and about this company, because I look back now, and if I would have known better, I would have been scared to death. But I wasn't, because I think my previous jobs prepared me for, I do what I do and I work with them, and just nothing fazed me. And it was just a fun company to work for. I didn't think about it back then. That wasn't on my radar, which I think probably like it is now. It's on people's radar, but that didn't even enter my mind. Well, I have to tell you, for me, starting at Microsoft, I was able to do that. Microsoft allowed me to do things that I never had any experience in. I mean, I started doing trade shows, never done a trade show in my life. And so the first thing was I was doing, not Comdex, but a Computer World. And so Karen Abel, who was the manager of trade shows at the time, there was just 3 of us. And so she put the last year's Computer World folder on my desk, and she said, "You're doing it. If you have any questions, let me know." Well, I never did a trade show. So I looked through the file. I never, had to put the information together, the objectives, the goals, and talk to the marketing people, but I learned quickly you have to fly at the seat of your pants or you're going to fail. But it was so exciting because I accomplished everything that I said. But that was because Microsoft was so good about letting me do what I needed to do, and everybody was just so helpful. So after 4 years of doing events, company meetings, trade shows, I was getting pretty burnt out because we were working like 15-hour days as we were getting closer to the events. And so I worked real close with Buck Ferguson on the analyst meetings and Frank Gaudette. And so I talked to them, and they said, "Well, why don't you start an executive briefing center?" and a program and work with the sales department. So it was like, okay, but I've never done that before. So I just started talking to people. Microsoft allowed me to go to like IBM, all these different other software, hardware companies. So I would fly around and talk to the people who started their executive briefing centers and just say, okay, what worked, what didn't work. And so that helped. And then I was very fortunate that people here at that time, and I'm sure it's still this way, everybody was just so willing to help. And because I was the coordinator, but I couldn't do it all by myself. I needed everybody that worked here to pull these projects together. So, after another 3 years of doing the Executive Briefing Center facility and program, then through that, we started Bill Gates Oral History Program. So I worked with David Ellison at the Smithsonian Institute, set everything up in archives, and so we shot videos of Bill, started talking about BASIC and how all that started with the tape and going through to where we were at that time. And so David Ellison said, Cass, you need to talk to him about starting a museum. You guys really need, to get all this down and have a facility. So that's where the first museum started. So I talked to Bill. He said, write up a program, which I did, and got a budget in place. So he said, okay. And so that's when the first employee museum started. So I went through that to completion, and then that's when I left the company because I was exhausted. Very nostalgic, very nice to see people my age walking around and not younger people in their 20s and 30s that work here now. But it just made me feel proud of things that we accomplished, and just a great time, the time I was here just working. And it was just fun to see how Microsoft is advancing in facilities and the commons that they're going to build. I just think what a wonderful time to work here also. Well, I wanted to give you a memory about Buck Ferguson and Frank Gaudette, because when I first started here, I worked really closely with these two guys, and I have to tell you that for someone with my background to be able to come to a company like Microsoft and be able to be trusted and do the things that they allowed me to do and be successful at, it was all due because of Buck Ferguson. Frank Gaudette was fantastic. He would once a month call me in his office, and he loved to gossip. And so he always wanted me to let him know what was going on. And I said, Frank, I can't gossip with you because my job entails me working with everybody. And so I have to be quiet about certain things. And he used to get so frustrated with me. But, it just shows, like with Frank Gaudette, Mike Maples, Bill Gates, Steve Ballmer, it was just, I think, because it was a smaller company, we all knew each other. It was an open door policy. It was just a great time to work. And I have to tell you a quick story about, I did the 15-year company anniversary, and so that coincided with the Saturday Night Live 15-year anniversary. So we decided, well, let's play off that. Let's do a Saturday Night Live theme. And it was fantastic. All the executives were right there. Steve Ballmer was a cone head, and we had, I think, Kevin Neely and Dana Carvey come, and they did the Hans and Franz. We knew that Bill wasn't going to rehearse, so we had him actually sit at the news desk with Dana Carvey, and so, or maybe it was Kevin Neely, so that just worked out really well. So those were the days that we were able to do all those fun things, but there again, it was a much smaller company.